What's up, sports fans? This is the Lucas Ross Sports Channel. We continue with our 2025 college football predictions for the upcoming 2025 college football season. Up next is the Oregon Ducks. Oregon coming off a 13-1 season last year in 2024. They went to the college football playoff, but they were eliminated in the quarterfinals by Ohio State. And this is a team that actually won it all in the Big Ten last year. They went undefeated at 12-0 and then 13-0 if you count the Big Ten championship win. My thoughts on this Oregon team before we get into the prediction for 2025. Dante Moore takes over at quarterback. How good is he going to be? That's obviously going to be a big question mark there for Oregon. I don't know if he'll be as good as Dylan Gabriel was, but he's a former five-star player, so he definitely should develop right away for this Oregon offense. I mean, everywhere around him looks like it's going to be pretty talented. I mean, a lot of new faces are going to have to step up because they did lose quite a lot from last year, and that kind of goes for the defense as well. But still, this is an Oregon team that definitely should be a top 10 team and then also a top 5 team, and they're still in that playoff conversation as well. And actually, their schedule is kind of quite easy this year in 2025 because they don't play Ohio State in 2025 just like they did from last year, but they will play a couple of tough opponents, which I'll talk about in just a moment. But again, last year Oregon was 13-1 in 2024. Let's go game by game, and I'll give you my official prediction for the Ducks for 2025. And they start things off with Montana State on August the 30th. They will play this team out of the FCS. You know, Montana State actually went to the FCS championship last year. They were actually undefeated last year before losing to North Dakota State. So this is actually a pretty good team out of the FCS, but I think Oregon overall should be the better team, but I don't think it will be an easy win, you know, like a 30-point win or anything like that. Maybe it's only like a 17 or 20 point win. Let's just put it that way. And remember, last year against Idaho for Oregon, they struggled against that Idaho team. If you don't remember that first game, they only won that game by 10. But I think they will probably learn from that. You know, some of those players probably on that team last year, they probably learned from that, and they probably take care of business against Montana State. But like I said, not a blowout. I think they win it by at least 17 or 20 plus something, you know, ready, or like, you know, 17 to 20 plus points, somewhere in that particular point range. And they start off 1-0, and then they play Oklahoma State after that out of the Big 12 on September the 6th. This will be a home game here for the Ducks. You know, Oklahoma State obviously wasn't really good last year. Don't know how good this team is going to be. You know, Mike Gundy is a pretty good coach. He's been around there for several years, but I just don't know how good some of these teams are going to be after coming off a disappointing year. You know, that goes for some of these other teams, which I'll get to in just a moment. But yeah, Oklahoma State, I think Oregon playing at home will take care of business in this one. I don't really think it's going to be a blowout as well, but I think it's kind of similar to the Montana State game. It's probably a 17 or 20 point win, but still, the Ducks playing at home should be able to get it done. So I got Oregon winning that game, and I got them starting off 2-0. Then they play they open up Big Ten play at Northwestern on September the 13th. Northwestern was a team last year also coming off a pretty big disappointing year. They were just 4-8 last year. I don't think Northwestern is going to be really that great this year. They got a lot of new players on their roster that I just don't know if they'll have the, you know, I just don't think they have like the roster to compete with Oregon at all. So I think Oregon definitely takes care of business. They beat Northwestern here on the road on September the 13th, and I got them starting off 3-0. And then they play Oregon State at home on September 20th. Obviously, this is a rivalry game. You know, Oregon State, they weren't not really that great last year either. So yeah, you know, some of these teams that Oregon is playing in 3 weeks in a row, these teams were not really that great last year. They can definitely turn things around, but I just don't know how good they're going to be. I know Oregon State is a rivalry game. You know, there's always been pretty good matchups between these two teams, but last year's game was not even close. I think Oregon playing at home this year, this is probably not going to be a close game at all, but I don't think it will be a blowout, just like I mentioned with Oklahoma State and Montana State, 17 or 20 point wins, somewhere in that point range. And I got them beating the Beavers here on September 20th, and I got Oregon now improving to 4-0 before playing a tough test on the road at Penn State on September 20th. 27th. Obviously, this is the biggest game on the schedule for Oregon. It's a rematch from last year's Big Ten championship. Penn State's going to be pretty good this year. This team has a chance to be a top 5 team and then also definitely a playoff contender. Drew Rattler is back at quarterback. They have a ton of experience coming back on both sides of the football. Yeah, this is going to be a pretty good game. I think it will be a low-scoring defensive battle, though. It probably comes down to which quarterback I do trust, and I do trust Drew Rattler definitely a lot more than probably, Dante Moore. And this is definitely his first true tough road test. It's a very tough place to play. I'm assuming this is probably going to be one of those whiteout games here for Penn State. And if that happens, then yeah, Oregon definitely probably doesn't have a shot here. I mean, they do have a shot to at least beat Penn State, but playing on the road, I think Penn State takes advantage, and I think they get revenge here on Oregon from losing last year's Big Ten championship. And I got the Nittany Lions giving Oregon their first loss of the season, and I got Oregon now falling to 4-1 on the year. And then they get their first bye week. They'll play Indiana at home on October the 11th. This is also another tough game, but the good news is the Ducks get a bye week before playing this game. If they had to play this game the next weekend, then that would definitely be a lot tougher because they're coming off a physical game. You get some time to recover after that physical game against Penn State on September 27th, and then you play Indiana. I think Oregon's going to come out fired up for this one. I know there's a lot of hype around Indiana. I think they're actually going to be pretty good. They'll be a top 15 team, and you never know, a dark horse playoff contender. Kirk Zanetti has already shown us how much of a winner he is for this Indiana football team, but I think Oregon definitely has cleared the better team here. I don't think Indiana is quite to that level just yet against some of the top talented teams. We saw last year, with Indiana against, a talented Ohio State team. They were actually not very competitive, and playing this game on the road, that's definitely going to be tough here for the Hoosiers, so I think Oregon wins this one. I'm going to say by like 10 to 14 points, maybe 10 at least, but I got the Ducks winning this one here at home against Indiana on October the 11th. That puts the Ducks at 5-1. Then they play Rutgers on the road on October the 18th. This will be kind of a tough game here for Oregon. Maybe kind of a trap game because Rutgers are definitely going to want to run the football. But I think Oregon definitely is clearly the better team here. Maybe they start off a little bit slow, maybe in the first quarter, but then Oregon starts to kind of figure things out in the second quarter about stopping the run here for the Scarlet Knights. And I think Oregon takes advantage of that, and I think they win this one here on the road at Rutgers on October the 18th. That puts Oregon at 6-1, and they play at home against Wisconsin on October 25th. Now, you look at Wisconsin from last year, they actually almost gave Oregon a loss last season. They were actually the closest team to beat Oregon last year. Oregon only won by 3. I think they won like 16-13 if that was the final score from last year. So yeah, the Ducks definitely had all kinds of problems against the Badgers. Maybe the defense for Wisconsin probably comes out fired up, but I think playing at home, Oregon's going to come out fired up. They're going to come out a little bit frustrated because after that game from last year, and I think Oregon definitely takes advantage of that, and I think they beat the Badgers of Wisconsin here on October 25th, and that puts them now at 7-1. And again, I don't really know how good Wisconsin is going to be, just like some of these other teams like Oklahoma State, for example, then Northwestern and Oregon State, and also Wisconsin. I just don't know how good these these 4 teams are going to be this year in 2025. And then they get their second bye week before playing on the road at Iowa on November 8th. Iowa's got a lot of question marks. I mean, I do like their starting lineup, especially on their defensive side of the football, but the depth chart definitely does concern me here for Iowa. They don't really have a ton of depth on either side of the football, and they don't really have a proven offense, if that does make sense. So I think Oregon definitely is the better team here, and I also think the bye week kind of helps them out here before playing a tough road game against the Hawkeyes. And I know a lot of people are saying that Iowa's a top 25 team, but I really don't think so. I think Iowa, they can probably give Oregon a close game in the first half, but second half, I think the depth is going to probably wear out here for Iowa, and I think Oregon pulls away in the second half. So I got the Ducks getting the win here on the road at Iowa, and that puts them at 8-1. Next, they play Minnesota on November the 15th. This will be a home game for the Ducks. Kind of a similar team to Rutgers. They're going to want to run the football in this game, try to waste the clock down and keep that Oregon offense off the field for as long as possible. But still, it's a home game for the Ducks. I don't really see Oregon losing this one at all. I think Oregon wins this one by double digits at least, so about 10 to 14 points. Let's put it that way. Then they play USC at home on November 22nd. USC lost a lot from last year on the defensive side of the football. I mean, that's probably the concern that I have here for this USC team. Kind of another team that I don't know how good they're going to be, but Lincoln Riley is a guy that can, have an offense that can score some points. I think they will score some points here against the Ducks, but still, it's an Oregon team that definitely should be overall the better team, and they're playing at home in this one, so I don't really see the Ducks losing this one either. I think it's probably close in the first half, but then Oregon probably pulls away, and their defense starts to step up. So I got Oregon winning this one, and I got them proving to 10-1, and then they close things out with rival Washington. They play this one on the road on November 29th. I think Washington's going to be a little bit better this year under Jetfish. I mean, they could probably be like a 6-6 or a 7-5 type team. I mean, this Washington team, I think they're kind of trending in that right direction, but it's a team that really isn't on the level of Oregon, in my opinion. This Oregon team definitely overall is the more talented team, but it's late in the season. It's a rivalry game. It's on the road. Very tough place to play. You never know. An upset probably could happen here, but I think Oregon definitely is the more talented team. Now, last year's game was close in the first half. Maybe it could be close. It could be a similar type game from last year. It could be probably a game that goes into the first half, being close, but second half, that's where probably Oregon steps up, and they probably pull away. So I think Oregon definitely beats Washington here, and I got them finishing 11-1 for 2025. And I know that seems like not a really good prediction here for Oregon, because a lot of people think that Oregon's going to take a step back of a year, but you look at this schedule, it does give them a chance to get back to the Big Ten championship. And really, the toughest games, in my opinion, are probably Indiana and Penn State. Definitely that Penn State game on the road, but you got some trap games against Iowa and Washington. Definitely that Washington game is a game that you don't want to sleep on if you're Oregon, because that's a rivalry game, and that's a very tough place to play in Seattle. But still, I think Oregon overall is the better team in that game, and I think the Ducks will prevail in that one. So again, 11-1 is what I'm going to go with here for Oregon. I think their best case scenario is probably going undefeated at 12-0. Don't know if I can see them going 12-0 again this year, but it could be possible. And then their worst case, probably 10-2. If they go 10-2, that's definitely probably a big step back from where they were last year. But I think this team is overall a playoff contender, and that should be enough to possibly maybe make it to the Big Ten championship once again in 2025. So that is my prediction for Oregon for 2025. It's 11-1. Do you guys agree or disagree with this prediction? And give me your prediction for the Ducks down in the comments below. Thanks for watching this video, and stay tuned for more sports content videos on my Lucas Ross Sports YouTube channel.